بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل. Sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In the continuation of the stories of prophets that we started many weeks ago, last week we touched upon the life of Prophet Ibrahim, and naturally, as a consequence of his life, the life of two of his sons, or the only, according to historians, the only two sons that he had, although some others have indicated that other sons from other marriages after the death of Hajar and Sarah, but I consider that part of the Israelite ahadith that has got into Islamic history. For the time being, we say that Prophet Ibrahim has only two sons, Ismail and Ishaq. Although both of them have been clearly established by our literature and by the Hebrew literature, but when we analyze the two stories, they particularly with regard to who was the one who was to be offered as a sacrifice, whether it was Ismail or Ishaq, and the life of Ishaq in particular, the contrast could not be as wide as it is or could not be wider the way we have it in the two literature. Let's focus first on facts and then how these facts have been spun around to get a narrative. The facts are that Prophet Ibrahim, at the age of 80 or something, asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a son. That's without shadow of a doubt. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants him the son from his second wife Hajar. Then here is the split in the way literatures spin the whole story. From our point of view, because he had asked Allah for the son and not waited for the granting of the son immediately after the birth of the child or the baby, Allah command Ibrahim to take his wife Hajar as well as the baby to what we call a desert that nothing existed around. بواد غير ذي زرع, as the Quran said, عند بيتك المحرم, and leave them there and go back. That is exactly what he did, and then comes back. Later on, when the Malaika come down to go and punish Qawm Lut, there is a debate between him and Ibrahim regarding Qawm Lut, and ultimately they give the glad tiding to Sarah, who was at that time 90 years old, and Ibrahim around 100, that she is going to have a child at that age. So both of these children, both of these boys, Ismail and Ishaq, have linked to miracle. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted Ibrahim by both of these sons miraculously. Then Ishaq is born. The debate is what was the age of Ismail when Ishaq was born. Even in the Hebraic and the Jewish tradition, they differ from 3, 5, 7 or 13. So clearly there is no debate factually that Ismail is the first son, was first born. Now, over time, when the four different sources of the Pentateuch, the G, the A, the E, and the P sources, we have discussed this many years ago when we were talking about the sources of the Jewish as well as the Christian Bible or New Testament. These sources have been mixed together and compiled into a literature that we can actually see it. While the beginning of it says first Ishmael is born, and then the next one, when the story of sacrifice comes in, you should sacrifice your first son Isaac. This is where the conflict comes in. Historically, they have already admitted that Ishmael was the first son, but then the rabbis and the scholars, the Jewish scholars, have begun spinning the whole thing that no, according to Jewish tradition, the son of a slave or an old slave is not considered to be the right son or half son. So the true son is Isaac rather than Ishmael. That's something that exists. As far as the life of Prophet Ismail goes, 11 times or so his name has been mentioned in the Holy Quran. Part of a number of messengers, but primarily focuses on the life of Ismail as the one that went through the sacrifice and ultimately helped Prophet Ibrahim in building of the Kaaba. We have verses in the Holy Quran that says وَإِذْ يَرْفَعَانِ, the both of قَوَاعِدَ لِلْبَيْتِ, both the father and the son working together to lay the foundation of the Kaaba. And the prayer of Prophet Ibrahim, that I'm bringing my family into this desert, and he asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant them the privilege of being guided and the sustenance and everything else in the future. Ismail is considered to be the father of the Arabs in the area, because according to the tradition, although we don't have much information regarding how he grew up beyond some anecdotal stories, but the basic formation of the Arab community around Kaaba is attributed to Prophet Ismail because of the Zamzam. And when Hajar was left by her son, and she kept searching for water between Safa and Marwa, the two hills either side, 7 times going one side or coming back to the others, finally lost hope, went to check on her son to realize that there was some kind of a spring under his feet, and that spring became the source of water and vegetation, where the Juhrum, Arab Juhrums, in the tribes, as they traveled around, settled down in the area, and that became the sources of the Arab tribes in the area. Because there are huge amount of gap or lack of information about the growth or the early growth of Prophet Ismail's life in the area, historians have borrowed this, what we call the Israelite tradition, from other sources, and somehow this has got percolated into the history in Islam. Whether Prophet Ismail went back to Palestine or not is debatable. There are clearly some ahadith that says at the time of the departure of Prophet Ibrahim, both of his sons, Ismail and Ishaq, were present. There are relationship between sons of Ismail and daughters of Ishaq that they got married, so there are connection between the two. Because Ismail was the older child, and the prophecy of Ishaq comes after the death, he actually meets with Ishaq to gives him some secrets of the prophethood to his brother, and to become a prophet after him. These are basic things that we know about the life of Ismail. Mentioned a few verses in the Holy Quran regarding the life of Ismail with other prophets. But if you go to Surah Safat, clearly establishes the sequence of the event, that first it was Ismail that was attempted sacrifice was made on his life. Once Prophet Ibrahim submitted to the command of Allah and went through it, Allah rewarded him by the second birth of Ishaq. So if we look at the sequence, Ismail comes first, goes through the sacrifice. Ibrahim goes through the sacrifice and tested. And part of one of the few occasions the Quran uses Azim, Bala'un Azim, is in the case of Prophet Ibrahim and Ismail, that it's a huge test for Prophet Ibrahim to go through and come out. And then after that, Ishaq is born. So the sequence clearly indicates that Ishaq is second child and Ismail is the first child. Jewish literature, however, they attribute a number of mix these facts, basic facts, with a huge amount of myth to create a story of Genesis and the story of creation and the story of Prophet Ibrahim and his relationship to future generations. We don't have any indication historically that there were prophets between Prophet Ismail and the Holy Prophet. Certainly, they say that he was the father of the Arab community in the region, and the prophet from Prophet Ismail, descendant of Prophet Ismail, is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But Prophet Ishaq becomes his own story within the Quran and our literature. He becomes the father of Yaqub, and Yaqub becomes the father of Yusuf and his brothers. The story of Yusuf and the verse in the Holy Quran about not only how the story unpacks, but the story of Yaqub and Yusuf has become a classic story for parents how not to deal with their children, not to cause discrepancies between the children and favor one against the other in a manner that created some kind of dislike, hate, and resentment between children. The Jewish tradition attribute a number of mythical claim to Isaac, that he was asked to go and marry his cousin in Hilla, where the Prophet Ibrahim came from, brother of his father's son or something, a nephew. And after getting married over there, stayed and came back, he had two sons, Esau and Yaqub, and the conflict between Esau and Yaqub, and ultimately these stories exist, but we have, from our Ahlul Bayt, we don't have anything to clearly indicate, to substantiate or support this. But nevertheless, wherever there has been gaps in the story of any of these two, the Israeliyat literature has managed to get into the history of Islam in one way or the other. So we have repeatedly people going to the Imam and say, is it correct that Yaqub married 4 sisters? One of the claim in the Jewish tradition that he went to marry his cousin as well, and his uncle married him, gave him the first of his daughter, which wasn't the one he was asking for. So he said that in our tradition, when the oldest girl is around, we will not marry the youngest one. So he has to work another 7 years to get the second daughter, and then each daughter is been given by their father a slave woman, and they release these slave women to go to Yaqub. So out of these 4 wives, Yaqub has 11 or 12 sons, and the conflict that exists between these sons, that because their mothers are different, and the same story that attributed to Adam and the 2 sons, that my wife is not as beautiful as the other one's wife, and that led to the conflict between Qabil and Habil. Well, the Jewish tradition also talks about Prophet Isaac or Ishaq traveling to Egypt in the same manner that they claim Prophet Ibrahim went to Egypt. And the same story is repeated, which Allama Tabatabai criticized, that if you want even one proof that the whole Jewish tradition have been fabricated and they have gone through changes, you look at how the story of Prophet Ibrahim is being presented by the claim that Prophet Ibrahim took his wife Sarah to Egypt and pretended that his wife is his sister, so that he will be protected from the wrath of Pharaoh. And Pharaoh took his wife and married her for 2 or 3 years until they found out. The same story is narrated to Prophet Ishaq, that he went to Egypt and did exactly the same thing. His wife was claimed to be his sister, and the same story to be protected from the king of Egypt, etc. I mean, most of these mythical stories exist in the Jewish tradition, and I have discussed this with a number of rabbis that nonsensical. They quite openly criticize. They say, no, that's fine, because what our literature is trying to show is that Prophet Isaac was just an ordinary human being. He can commit mistakes like anybody else, and it's for us to analyze these mistakes and learn from them. I said, are you prepared as a rabbi to go somewhere where there is a threat and pretend that your wife is your sister for somebody else to take your wife, and then after a few years by accident they find out? They didn't give me the right answer, but they were quite easy to deal with the literature and say that it was fine. So Prophet Ishaq become another issue that in the context of current Zionist Palestinian issue, they try to relate the conflict to some kind of biblical debate, that you see why the Palestinians and the Zionists cannot live together in peace, because our mothers argued, Sarah and Hajar. Once you try to explain this in this language, then there is nothing you can do about it. It's a biblical issue. We might as well forget about the whole thing. Totally marginalizing the role of Zionism, the project of the Zionist project in the region, and how the colonial powers have wanted this project to exist to divide and be able to rule Palestine immediately and the Muslim world in general. You see this repeatedly mentioned, that with the story of when the Jewish literature wants to say why Ishmael was moved out of Palestine, they concoct a story that one day when Isaac was 3 years old, sitting on the lap of Prophet Ibrahim, Ishmael walks in, and Prophet Ibrahim moves Ishaq to the side and allows Ishmael to sit on his lap, which infuriates Sarah and says, enough is enough, Hajar and Ishmael, they have to go. The problem is that even the story contradicts the factual part, let alone the mythical. If Ishmael is 13 years older than Isaac, and Isaac, according to this tradition, is 3 or 4 years old, so by the time this story has happened, Ishmael must have been 17 years old. This is not something that you bring a teenager at the age of 17, remove a child at the age of 3 for a teenager at the age of 17 to sit on your lap. There are a number of these kind of mythical concoction that exist in the Jewish literature, but it exists, and some of these unfortunately have gone into our historical literature when there are gaps about where there is no continuity about the life. So what we have in our literature, the early age traveling or migration by command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, commanding Prophet Ibrahim to go back to Palestine and not stay with them. The next time that he goes back, Ismail is around 12 or 13, which he is commanded to sacrifice, and then that sacrifice is turned around into a sacrificial lamb. And here our literature, the Christian literature, immediately take this and move it towards the crucifixion of Jesus and as a sacrificial for human sin. And our literature, some of historians, particularly Shias, they try to use this as a conduit to bring it to Imam Hussein, and how Imam Hussein was sacrificed as a substitute for that. That was the beginning, and this grand sacrifice for similar stories to the Christian understanding. Also, we have Ismail and the building of the Kaaba. إذ يرفع إبراهيم القواعد من البيت وإسماعيل ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم. That story, and also the command for both of them that they are responsible to clean up the place. Now, since at that time there were no idols when they're building it, cleaning up the place is purification of the land and everything else. وعهدنا إلى إبراهيم وإسماعيل أن طهر بيتي للطائفين والعاكفين والركع السجود. That people that want to come and visit the site, that was the beginning of the concept of Hajj. Debate, minor debate or marginal debate as exactly how Prophet Ibrahim found out the exact map of Kaaba by Jibreel, or some information about Adam had already made some preliminary digging and left it there, so he dug the ground and found out that is something else. Another issue that Quran talks about Prophet Ismail is the very small, very little amount of information about how he became established itself in the land, I mean in the desert, and how many trips Prophet Ibrahim had to go and visit Ismail. Very little information exists, but huge amount of tafsir, mufassirin, and historical facts available in them. As far as the nubuwwah of Prophet Ismail and Prophet Ishaq, we have a number of verses in the Holy Quran. Sometimes Ishaq is identified by himself, sometimes Ismail is identified by himself, sometimes together. وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَىٰ إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَإِسْمَاعِيلَ وَإِسْحَاقَ وَيَعْقُوبَ. These are now the whole four are consecutively mentioned. واذكر في الكتاب إسماعيل إنه كان صادق الوعد وكان رسولا نبيا. Ismail is identified by himself. Sometimes we see the Ishaq and Yaqub, or Ibrahim and Ishaq and Yaqub are mentioned, and then Ismail is not there. A lot of narrative history exists regarding the relationship between Arab community and Ismail, whether they were descendant of Ismail in totality, or they were tribes that came and settled around Zamzam, and they, by association with Ismail and intermarriage and so on, they became established, or they were thought to be the Arab of that Arabian peninsula. Certainly we have a hadith from the Holy Prophet that says that I am the descendant of the two prophets, Ismail and Ibrahim, rather than just say Ibrahim in itself. And the list of the names of their ancestors from Prophet Prophet Muhammad to Prophet Ismail are listed in the book, in the shajara, or a tree diagram that one could follow until we get to the stage. Prophet, the same thing. If we leave the myth and the stories narrated by the Jewish tradition, certain amount of information exists in the Quran regarding the life of Ishaq. Beyond it, we don't have much as far as how Ishaq grew, same manner that we don't have much about how Ismail grew. And the issue of marriage, children, and everything else, we have no information beyond occasionally reference. For example, when Yaqub was dying, he asked his children, whom do you follow? Or what direction? We follow Aba'ika, Ishaq wa Ibrahim, the name are mentioned. So these are the stories, and I'm going to stop here and then we see if there are any questions.